shoulder blade and down into the small of her back. Mina tucked Annabelle's glasses back into the drawer along with her catalog of the dead. She picked up her cane and stood carefully. What she really didn't need was to fall again. She already had one titanium hip and had no intention of going for a pair. She knew too many people who went into a hospital for a so-called routine procedure and came out dead. She carried her tea outside to the narrow covered porch that stretched across the back of the house. After an icy, miserable winter and a soggy spring, it was finally warm and dry enough to sit outside. Her unreplaced hip ached, and the old porch glider screeched an appropriate accompaniment as Mina settled into the flowered cotton cushions she'd sewn herself. She took off her glasses to rub the bridge of her nose, and the world around her turned to a blur. She was legally blind without her glasses, but she'd been secretly relieved when the doctor told her she was far too myopic for that laser surgery everyone talked about. "Oh, shush up," she said when Ivory gave a plaintive mew from inside the storm door. "You know you're not allowed out here." She put her glasses back on, and the porch and the marsh beyond snapped into focus. Mina rocked gently, taking in the view from Higgs Point, across the East River and Long Island Sound, and on to the Manhattan skyline. As a little girl, she'd watched from this same spot, behind the house where she'd lived all her life, as one after the other, Manhattan's skyscrapers had gone up. When the Chrysler Building poked its needle nose into the sky, she imagined that her bedroom was in the topmost floor of its glittering tiara. Then up went the Empire State, taller and without all that frippery at the top. It had been a dream come true when Mina, single, still, as her mother so often reminded her, and just out of school, got her first job there. Mina remembered wearing a straight skirt with a kick pleat, a peplum jacket, a crisp white-collared shirt, and a broad-brimmed lady's fedora that dipped down in the front and back, thinking that was all it took to make her look exactly like Ingrid Bergman. Movies, the war, and where you could find cheap booze were all anyone talked about in those days. 2 years later, the dream turned into a nightmare. For years after, the roar of an airplane engine brought the memory back, full force, and yet, there she had been living, and there she remained, right in the flight path of LaGuardia Airport. It was only after the long days of even more terrifying silence after 9/11 that the waves of sound as airplanes took off, one after the other, had become reassuring. All is well. All is well. All is well. Right now, what she heard was a buzz that turned into a whine too high-pitched to be an airplane. Probably Frank Cutler, her across-the-street neighbor, installing marble countertops or a hot tub, making a silk purse or, what was it they called it these days? Putting lipstick on a pig. At least he wasn't rooting around in her trash or practicing his golf swing again. The last time she'd asked him to please stop using her marsh as his own personal driving range, he'd grinned at her like she'd cracked a particularly funny joke. "Your marsh?" he'd said, then added something under his breath. And when she politely asked him to repeat what he'd said, he told her to turn up her hearing aid. Ha ha ha. Mina's eyesight might be fading, but her hearing was as sharp as it had ever been. The buzz grew louder. Perhaps he was using a bandsaw. When he got around to adding dormers to the second floor, maybe he'd find the front tooth she'd lost playing under the eaves with Linda McGilvery when they were 5 years old. Linda, who'd been fat and not all that bright, but awfully sweet, and who died of leukemia, at least 40 years ago, though it still seemed impossible to Mina that she could remember so clearly something that happened so long ago. Insidious disease. Mina had been a bridesmaid at Linda's wedding. Awful dress. The sound morphed into a whinny, and then into a whap, 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 yanking Mina from a billow of pink or